the lenses by which we talk about leadership is really these 6 qualities of virtues: faithful stewardship, proper work ethic, integrity, patriotism, excellency, and servant leadership. You are those servant leaders. I can't go into each one of these, but I want to start with where I started. That we want to start with what does God demand of us? Our Lord summarized it in a very, very good way. When he was asked to summarize all the books in the Bible, the history of man, he put it in 2 commandments. And I would request that we read it together. Can we read it together from the back? Are you able to see? Yes. What does the commandment say? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. That was his summary. That religion, really, the purpose of religion is to connect people to God in order that they can love God and then the neighbors. Every religion that is the center of it all. Any religion that does not help you to do that, shouldn't even exist. And I've put some words in red. Have you noted the words that I put in red? It encompasses the holistic education. The holistic education should address the heart, the head, the hands, and the house. The heart has to do with character. The head has to do with the mind, the academics, that is the mind. The soul has to do with the conviction, personal conviction. The hands deals with skills. While the house deals with your responsibility to your neighbor. So please make note of, if you can take a picture of that. All that we'll be sharing during these 3 days will revolve around that holistic education. In much of what you are, and Professor, you've brought it well, that as academic institutions, you are the solution to community problems. You are the ones to provide those solutions. But it all comes to what kind of education are we giving out? Is it holistic? Does it address the mind? Does it address the heart? Does it address the skills? Does it address community responsibility? Are people who come out able to love their neighbors, themselves, so that they put self second to others? That is the holistic education that leaders, when a leader like you is emerging now, live a life that is holistic in those 4 areas. We call them the 4H: the head, the heart, the hands, and the house. Those 4H is the essence of holistic education. Now, I'm going to go into that each one of those in a minute. But when the Lord was making a comment, he said, there is no commandment greater than this. All the law, all the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. You can find them, if you're sufficiently interested, in Mark, in Matthew, and Luke. In those chapters, see, they're repeated. But I'm sure, whether you come from the Muslim religion or any other, you have something similar. I didn't check out with the Quran how these are brought out, but I know the essence is the same. Love God first, and then love your neighbor. The more you love God, the more you understand that God is not a selfish God. He expects us to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Now, I'm going to quote a couple of other scriptures. In the Old Testament, we have Psalms 78, 72, talking about one of those successful people who have that kind of holistic approach to life, was David. King David is one of, in Islam you have him as Dauda, I think, and we have him in Christianity as David. The Bible talks about David as having shepherded his people with integrity of heart and with skillfulness of hands. When he was writing the psalm, He said, who is it that will ascend to God? He said, he who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not lift his soul to falsehood, nor sworn deceitfully. So you'll notice that in leadership, both in the Old Testament, in the New, in history, the people who led very well always combined those 4 H's. David combined the heart, which means character and integrity. He combined it with the skillfulness of hands. That is, he had a lot of skills of leadership. You as emerging leaders, you need a lot of skills. Leadership skills, managerial skills, administrative skills, relational skills, interpersonal skills. As you grow, the seriousness, the success of your leadership depends so much on how skillful you are. You may have a lot of gifts, but if you don't know how to relate, you don't know how to relate with others, you always test it here in the guild, because if you are, for example, a leader who never listens, you are always wanting your way, you are lacking in interpersonal skills. It is always these skills that make you succeed. So skills are very important. So he led with skillfulness of hands, but he also led with a pure heart, integrity of heart. Look, I've put them in 4 pictures here: the head, the heart, the hands, and the house. Let me go now to each one of them briefly before we continue. What we are dealing with as Emerging Leaders program, we are dealing with an holistic approach to leadership, which equips, empowers, and supports the new leaders we want to have in Uganda, so that what we are struggling with now is a lack of those 4 in one way or another, as I'm going to explain. The first is the first H, which is the head. It has to do with comprehension. When you go into university, you sit in the lecture room, the first thing you think about is academic knowledge, which is education. You want to understand. It keeps changing your mindset. You keep changing by understanding, by getting new information about yourself, about your community, history, other nations. You start to change by that teaching. It is a conscious part of your mind that we are dealing with in that education. The first part, the academics, deal with that: mathematics, English, sciences, and so on. The second is the soul, which has to do with what normally we call the subconscious mind. The knowledge that we accumulate, we get. Knowledge is the accumulation of facts. You collect all these facts and then you accumulate them in the mind. They constitute a small part of our education. But when that knowledge starts to get into you and change you, then it's dealing with the conviction. You are so convicted, and therefore it affects your will, so the decisions you make. But also, it starts to give you a vision of the future, because that knowledge now has changed the way you look at things. You start to see a better Uganda. You start to see a better district where you come from. You start to see a better community. You start to see a better village, because we've read about so-and-so who changed this community, or this is what we should be like. So that second part, the soul, is so important. In the normal language, you call it the subconscious mind. Now, what's the difference between the two? Suppose you consider a doctor who has read a lot about the nature of our bodies and why smoking is bad, drinking, and then you find this doctor is a drunkard and falls on the street and they are carrying him. Now, what do you make of that kind of doctor? He knows how bad smoking is, but he's a smoker, a chain what? Smoker. What would be your estimate, your understanding about that? That means what he got here in the head did not get into the conviction that will result into his will and deciding and saying, no, although smoking is good and I enjoy booze and drinking, I will not, because the will, the part of the will has now been captured by the knowledge. The knowledge in the mind, the conscious mind, has gotten into the conviction. Now, not smoking is now a result of his conviction. Now we have leaders who have a lot of knowledge here. They can tell you about everything, and they can even give you a lecture about how corruption is bad, but they are corrupt. Isn't it? Just like they are corrupt. You know, when you go behind their desk, you'll find a lot of what? Corruption. So that means what they have is mainly the head, which ends in the head, in the mind only, but it has not affected their what? A soul. And the conviction is not there. It is the politics without conviction, much of it, and without principles, as we have called it. Our past, some of you came in late. Somebody who introduced here was talking about that. Now, we go to the third one, which is the heart, which is another part which many in universities, normally this is not emphasized. And because we understand the trichotomy of man differently. From the scriptures, man has three parts. You are a spirit, you have a soul, you live in a body. I'm not going to go into the details, but we know that man is more than what is seated on this chair today. You have a part which we don't see. It is that part of you after your body, after you die. They say, that there's a part of you who has left. Now that part is what we call your spirit. And when it lives with your mind, with your soul. So the part that is listening to me is the real you, the spirit and the mind. If you come from Buyikwe, there is a place called Bukunja. Have you heard of Bukunja? There are people who are called night dancers there. That body you are seated with there, they will end up eating it in a week or two. So they haven't really eaten you. What they have eaten is your body, but the real you have what? Have left. So you are not really that body. Many people spend so much time, if I'm sure they are not here, but there are people who would spend 1.5 hours in a mirror just admiring themselves and spend a lot of money on their physical body, which is not the real you. The physical body is just part of you, is the house where you live. That is the house where you live. This is 70 or 80 years you're going to live here on earth. The real you will not be here 90 years from now. It will not be here. This body is not the real you, but you need it. You need to keep it healthy because you need to walk in here. We need to see you, otherwise you will be a demon and we will cast you out. No. So you need a physical body while we are here. Exercising your leadership, you need a physical body. A strong body for that matter, so you feed it. But the real you is right inside. Now, that is so important because the reason why we have so much corruption, people look at more of their outer part, which is the body, feeding it, dressing. Some people you go into their houses and they have shoes all over the place. And when will it ever be enough? Now, that is a problem of really understanding who we really are. Look at the part here, the heart. This is the real you. This is where character is built, wisdom, the fear of God, the integrity, the values, personal discipline, personal leadership. This is the moral fabric of the person, the quality of person who you are. You say, no, I can't do that. I cannot lie. I cannot cheat. This is the part here. From the second part, you get into this one where when you live by conviction and values and principles, this is where the Bible calls the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. In school, we use the word wisdom, not exactly how the Bible uses it. When a child is smart, quick, clever, we say he's wise. No, but that's not the wisdom of the Bible. The wisdom of the Bible is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You have to have the fear of the Lord to have wisdom. You can't just have it. You may be clever. That is the class type of cleverness. Somebody who is quick. Some of you are very clever in school even now. In class, you're very clever. You're the one who gets it. But that's not the wisdom the Bible talks about. The wisdom which the Bible talks about stems from the fear of God. It is a result of knowledge which has been applied. So knowledge is the accumulation of facts. But wisdom is the ability to apply that knowledge in the day-to-day life. I repeat, knowledge is the accumulation of facts. You have accumulate so many facts about geography, some of which you can't even use. I remember some of the knowledge I accumulated when I was in secondary, when I was in higher, when I was in university. Some of this information I can't even remember. I never even used it. That is accumulation of knowledge. You may even get papers for it. But if you can't apply it, the Bible says that is just accumulation of facts. But in order for you to have wisdom, you need to have the ability to apply that knowledge. Have you seen some people who have many degrees but they're roaming the street, they can't make their ends meet? Yes, when actually a simple woman in Nakulabye who has not even gone to school is able to make her ends meet, feed her children, pay her school fee, their school fees and rent. You see, that is the accumulation of knowledge but with no wisdom. Wisdom, the Bible says, is the wisdom comes from the fear of the Lord. So this is what we are talking about. And then it builds your character. Your character. First, what you do is an act. You do it, you lie one time, it's an act. If you keep lying, it becomes a behavior. When you go beyond that behavior, it becomes your character. Or your molimbo. Now they call you a liar. Now it has become your title. Now politicians that tend to do that, they start a small lie, then they start to believe their own lies, and then they speak them again and again. I start to believe those very same lies. I think you have seen that. I'm praying for you. You don't go that way, but it's so much typical in politics, where you start something small, you repeat it, and then finally it becomes you. Now this part here, heart, helps us to guard because it is the discipline. It's saying no. The word discipline comes from the word disciple. Disciple comes from the word discipline. You disciple your life according to a certain discipline, according to certain values, according to certain virtues. You say, no, I can't do that. Now that is where personal leadership starts. You lead yourself before you lead others. If you can't lead yourself, how can you lead others? So personal leadership precedes public leadership. And in the next sessions, we'll be talking a lot about that. How I have to lead myself first before I lead others. So what you've not conquered, you can't conquer it in others. You can't be a model to others if I've not conquered my appetites. Eating, drinking, sleeping, sex, what? That's where leadership begins. It begins with this self-leadership. That's self-discipline, self-dominion. I am able to say no to my appetites, to my desires. I can control them. That is self-leadership. That is where the heart is. Where do you get that strength? It comes from the heart. That's what the Bible calls the fear of the Lord. I cannot do that. I will not do that. You discipline your life according to set values, higher than yourself. They sustain you, and you've set your life accordingly. Great leaders are always like that. We look at Jesus as a model because he was able to do that. He was a model of self-leadership, self-discipline, self-sacrifice. Look at how he gave himself for all others. So leaders inspire others by the way they live, the way they are able to discipline themselves. Their desires are subservient to the needs of others, the levels of sacrifice. That's how you rise into leadership. You are able to say no to your desires today. You are able to say no to what you want, to what is right. Civilization is subjugating wants to what is right. What is right supersedes what I want today, what I enjoy today, and constitutes my conviction. Then we get to, now, if the whole society is like that, take an example. Let me first finish the one of the heart. Look at many of our leaders we have in public space. Some, maybe there are many who are good, but there are so many now. The reason for rampant corruption is because we have people who have the head knowledge, they have the papers, they have a degree, they have 2, they have 3. Put them in any position of leadership where money is involved. They studied accounting, they know how auditing is done. So when you give them billions of money, they know how to swindle it. But also they are so educated that they're able to cover their every audit trail because of their. So what do you call that? So that they are so educated in the head, they can cover every audit trail. So even when you bring auditors, you can't find, the money has been stolen, but you cannot prove it because they're smart. Even if you bring a sniffer dog, it cannot locate where the money. So you don't want the education of the head without the education of the heart. Where you have the education of the heart, somebody has papers, has all these things, but they can cover their audit trails. And what we are struggling is and grappling with in the country is, 50 million is stolen, and you have to use 80 million to what? To investigate the 50 million that was what? Stolen. Because the guy who stole it, the first team you sent, you gave them a chiso, 5 million. That group said, no, there's no problem. Then another group came from this side, and so out of the 50, he has used only 10 to neutralize the investigation. And so you end up losing the 50 and the 80. So we lose 100 and what? And 30. Isn't that the problem? Yes. So that's where our problems are now. Because we have 22 agencies, for example, now fighting corruption. 22 different agencies. But when I'm chairing the committee, which is now going to bring these 22 government agencies and then the non-state actors. We told government recently, said now we need to bring us on board now, we who are not state. The religious leaders, the cultural leaders, the media, the youth, the women. Let's form another team, which is not the 22, so that we now also get what? Involved. You are given knowledge so that we fight this. The way we did HIV and AIDS, it became a national battle. Everybody was involved. And what the president did was to appoint Bishop Michael Kauma, the late, and said, let it be chaired by somebody who is not government. And you'd see prevalence fell from 7 to 5% in 5 years. That's what happened when all of us got involved. So that's what we suggested. We told them, let's have the 22 there do their work, because for them, they have to do it by the law. They have to prove it. You have to come with the laws, and if you can't find a section, you'll not implicate anybody, and he will win you, and he will sue you, and you'll pay him. So for you have to use the law. What do we use when you are dealing with corruption from the heart? You come and speak words, and they sharpen the conscience. They bring the conviction, the one that I've just mentioned here. The conviction of the heart will make somebody, sleepless in the whole night, and will bring back the money that is stolen without you, using necessarily the law. The law is good because it can get some people and pin them. But where you have people who are very smart, clever, we used to have some words used in the schools. When they separate kids according to the clever, the sharp, which are the other, bright, another one, bright, sharp. Some of you are in those, you were in the other ones. For you were not in the smart. In nursery and kindergartens, they group them, the smart, bright, they're those words. But all those are talking about the mind. They're not referring to the heart. And from the outset, I want us to understand that difference. When you are dealing with wisdom, the word wisdom has to do with the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of what? Wisdom. Without that, you may be clever, you may be bright, you may be sharp. The other words we use in the natural is shrewd. Shrewd. Which other word? Dr. Lwere, help us. You are the one, the expert in this. Sharp, shrewd, cunning. Which other word? Cunning. Those are the words we use for people who are bakalaba. Now that is the those are the ones we are struggling with in this country. Bakalaba kalaba. Eh? Street smart. We have also many terms. But though that is not, none of those is wisdom. Wisdom has to do with the what? The fear of God. And our engagement is here, is really to raise leaders who have that fear. That even when the lights are not on, when the lights are out, somebody can trust you with his wife and you'll be safe. Hallelujah. Even when the policeman is not on the what? On the street, you'll still do the right thing. Yeah? Can anybody trust you with their wife? Ask your neighbor. Can somebody trust you with their wife when the lights are not on? That is the real issue. So can they leave you with their money? Their money and says, I didn't count, but keep it for me. Can they be safe? Okay. So that is the part. Okay. One is in the mind, another one is in the what? In the heart. Now, a university, our coming in is, our role as religious leaders is to sharpen the what? The conscience. Government has tools to deal. Government has three responsibilities: to protect, to promote righteousness and welfare of the society, but also to punish errant behavior. Now, because for them, that's all they have. They use the sword, the gun, to punish errant behavior. That is what they can do. That is their weapon. For us religious leaders, we don't use weapons. We use the word of God by speaking. But after we've spoken, if the word is properly spoken, it sharpens the conscience of the what? Of the people. Let me give you one testimony. One time there was a challenge in the municipality of Mbale. And there was major problems. So what I did was to invite 124 leaders from there under the Global Leadership Summit. We managed to put them here in Kampala, in Imperial Royal, for 3 days, like this engagement we're having. And what we are doing, we're just talking about some of the things I'm talking now. That was in 2015. And we had the LC5, the regional police commanders, all the people that matter in the whole of Mbale as a district, but also the municipality had about 12 leaders, mayor, deputy, and a few others. After 3 days of engagement, the mayor and his team, 11 of them, because there were 12, they said, we were cheated because we should have brought enough people like the rest of the district, because they brought the Gombola chiefs and all these people. But for us, we're only 12. We want to have another engagement like this for only the municipality. We said, well, the money, we don't have. Said, no, we have the money. We were planning to go to South Africa, Johannesburg, to benchmark. But we realized we cannot get what we've gotten here in South Africa, in Johannesburg. So just give us the dates and we'll come. So they did. They brought 4 buses, 174 people. We had 3-day engagement in near Grand Global. Many of you know Grand Global. You're in Makerere there, just opposite there. I said, that's what we can manage. We can't manage Royal, but we can manage Grand Global. So we had those 3-day engagements, 175. I asked the mayor, why did you bring all this? He said, I wanted each one of them to hear by themselves. And when they went back, the transformation that ensued shortly after that, within a few weeks, the Minister of Local Government called me, and by then was out of Mwesije. He's now the parliamentary clerk. He said, what exactly did you tell these people? The change is unbelievable. How come we can achieve so much? The city has changed, the cleanness, the what? It has been the most problematic district we've been having all this time. How come? And they said, at first we thought it was because of the opposition, because it's led by the opposition. I said, no, you use the law. For us, we use the word of God. We go to the heart. We go to the what? To the heart. We sharpen the conscience of the people so that whether the lights are on or off, the policeman is within. You create the policeman within the what? The person. So we are sitting with the 10 commissioners in the Ministry of Local Government, and we're devising ways that say the way to fight corruption is okay to use the law, but the most effective one, the cheapest, is when you sharpen the conscience of the what? of the people. Before we close, during this time, we'll talk about the conscience, because it's part of the heart. Have you heard of that word, conscience? It is a very important thing. The conscience is the part God has put in you, which tells you this is right, this is wrong. Anytime you are going to do wrong, it will tell you you are going to do wrong. That's why many times when you are making an appointment, meet in the dark under the other tree. So why? Because you know it is actually what? Wrong. The person you are going to meet is a married woman. So your conscience is telling you are doing something what? Wrong. So you go and do it in the dark because it is already. So the more you violate your conscience, the more you lose that voice. The voice within your heart is intended not only to stop you from doing wrong, but it also intended to protect you. The more sensitive it is, the more it will protect you from danger. You can tell. You are seated in the taxi, all of a sudden you hear something is wrong with this taxi. You move to the next one, and sure enough, when you get to Wama, the taxi we are sitting in before has had an accident. How did you know? Your conscience within is intended to protect you from danger. You are able, if you keep it, if you protect it, if you don't violate it, it will be a very, very good means to protect you from danger. Somebody comes and gives you a deal. Come and we enter this deal. It's going to make a lot of money. Something inside you tells you, no. Something is wrong with that guy. You have no empirical evidence, but something within you, your conscience. So your conscience is given to you not only to protect you from doing wrong, but it also protects you from falling into buying air. How many of us have bought air? Somehow, you knew there was something in you which said, hey, this one is, but you've submerged it and violated it so many times that even when it shouts, you no longer hear. And so when you're a leader, that is a very important part. To keep, especially for you who are still young, keep your conscience. Protect it. It's part of the heart here we are talking about. When you protect it, it will protect you from danger, from getting into dubious deals, being cheated. That is part of the heart. Why the heart is important. Because when you keep it like that, it will be you keep it sensitive. It's like, can you pinch your palm and you see the difference here? If you're pinching here and here, which is more sensitive? Which is more sensitive? Because it's protected. That's what you do. You protect it like here. But when you look at your palm, you can hit it and you don't feel anything. But you can't do that to your, because it's still sensitive. So you have to, as a leader, to keep your conscience that sensitive. When it says Zayo balance, somebody, so you take back the balance. So every time you don't take the balance, you violate your conscience. Yeah? You violate your what? So the next day, its voice will be less. Today, it was 50 decibels, shouting, take back the balance, take back the balance. You refuse, said no. So the next day again, you don't take, shout. The shouting, yesterday was 50 decibels, today it will be 40, the next it will be 30. So you keep losing the voice of your conscience. People who start to be corrupt, they don't start like that, no. They have been violating their conscience slowly. Eh? The first time they go in parliament, they fear bribes and what? They can't take bribes, they fear it. Oh, maybe I'm going very far. Let me start with this. A young lady has not had any sex before. Even when she's making appointments, she's scared in case she... The first time she has an engagement of sex, she cannot sleep. She feels so bad. Fornication. The next day when she does it, the voice is less. The third, the fourth, now she's so used to come back. She is not even affected at all. Because now the voice, the voice kept going down, and now she just does it. It's no longer a problem now. The first time, she could not sleep. She felt so bad. How come I give my body away like this? I will my husband. The second time, anyway, life wait. The third one, after 5-6 times, this is no. She just said, what is it? When you say, she doesn't, there's no longer any. So that's how you lose the voice of your what? Conscience. Kindly tell your neighbor, be careful with your conscience. It is given to you for your protection. Your protection. You keep violating it, the voice will become lower and lower and lower, and time comes when it doesn't feel anything. When you do that thing, you don't feel anything. You don't even remember. It's part of you. So normal. So even corruption is like that. New members of parliament, they go to parliament, they are not corrupt initially. No, they have come from Makele University and they go. But the first time, now we have something on this. Let's get this pass. Hey, how come? Now, but he has a need for rent, for school fees. Somehow reluctantly takes it, but can't sleep. Feels so bad that he has compromised a principle. The first time your conscience is shouting, is opposing, is saying you shouldn't. You shouldn't. You are a member of parliament. You should not compromise. The next time, it feels, the other time we did it and nobody discovered. Second, and then you go like that. By the time the 5 years are ended, now it is normal to do what? To ask. So, you are leaders who are going to these positions of leadership. Even now where you are, there is a challenge that you really, during your tenure of guild leadership, you'll stand your ground and say, I can say, you can check my record, I'm not corrupt. If you can go through that, after that period, then God has tested you for the next what? Next level. You have qualified for the next level. You can get into leadership by politicking or by those qualities I'm talking about. There are people who get into leadership by politicking, but if you get in those positions, you can get there and have a form. A form is where you have a position, but you don't have the quality. You have the form, but you don't have the substance. When you go through what I'm talking about, values, principle, self-discipline, self-leadership, self-dominion, self-control, sacrifice, you are qualifying yourself for true leadership. True leadership stems from self-discipline, self-conquest, self-dominion. Then you are both position and the substance. You have both. There are leaders who only have the form. You've been able to politic, to buy votes, and you get into position. The form is there, but the substance is not there. So it's possible to have. When a nation has leaders who have no substance, that nation starts to go down. That's how civilizations fall. Initially, they come with very, very high principles, values of virtue, of love, of self-sacrifice, of what? As they get used, their defenses go down. They no longer live by conscience. Now greed comes in, self-aggrandizement, entitlement, what, and then the curve starts to go down. And that's how all the civilizations have been. The Roman civilization started like that, and then it came down. The Greeks, the Persians, all the empires were like that. The British Empire. When corruption comes in, the nation of America now started on very high moral principles of leadership. Education was like that. Look at now what they are promoting. Look at what they are promoting now. When a civilization is about to fall, that's what it starts to be. Germany was like that. It was the most educated nation after the Reformation. They started like that. Now look at the moral decadence where Hitler came in and now started to use that whole machinery. So you as a leader, the point I'm making here is so important. You can make that decision from the outset and decide, I'm not going to be corrupted. I'm going to live by the heart, not just by the mind.